Hello, hello, hello. It is me, your True Hill Phenom SP3. We are back once again with our Dark Side of the Ring Season 1 review. This time, it is the last of the Von Erichs. And I am back once again with the princess of all the True Hills, Miss Chrissy Love.
What's going on, people? What's up? How y'all doing out there?
And we got the fresh cut, the trim fit.
Yeah. You see that? You see that bear? You see that lineup? That
Oh,
lineup,
the lineup is real
Alan.
fresh. He couldn't
yo.
wait for the reopening. He is the resident True Hill alcoholic, drunk guy JJ,
Uh,
or top guy
hey,
JJ.
yo.
I call him drunk guy.
Wow, he been doing too many videos with him. That's why. That's the whole problem. He can't even
Exactly.
tell the difference no more.
Exactly. They're top. They everybody confuses that, so I actually confused it. So top guy JJ.
He does so many goddamn fucking videos. I'm surprised he remembers who the fuck we are.
Right? The hardest
Well,
working man.
Chrissy is a lot better face to look at than the others that everyone else has hair on their face, so it's nice
SP
to look at a hairless
motherfucking
face.
SP the motherfucking Charlotte of the True Hills podcast.
Word. That's a fact.
Niggas
Yo,
on
there
all
we go. Hardest worker. Yes, we are back once again with our Dark Side of the Ring Season 1 review. This time it's the last of the Von Erichs, possibly the saddest episode of all the Dark Side of the Ring episodes. So, before we get into anything, drop us a like, make sure you show your support to our Dark Side of the Ring series, as well as the iCard down at the bottom to subscribe to the True Hill Heat YouTube channel. You could take a look at our whole playlist for Season 2, as well as the rest of Season 1 episodes before this one for the Montreal Screwjob and the match made in heaven and the killing of Bruiser Brody. And of course, push the bell to stay notified for more content right here on True Hill Heat. So, Miss Chrissy Love, what was your thoughts on this episode, The Last of the Von Erichs?
The last of the Von Erichs has to be one of the saddest things I have ever had to watch. It is sadder than the Chris Benoit, the Owen Hart, the Bruiser Brody one. This is a sad, like it was just sadness after sadness after sadness, just piling up on. Like there was, I think it was happiness towards the ending, like the last segment. Everything else was just sad.
Yeah, I mean, we got to get the full emotions of the main protagonist of this documentary. The first person that we gotta mention is, of course, Kevin Von Erich, the last of the Von Erichs, as the title affectionately notes. He is the son of Fritz Von Erich, who
Yep.
played a Nazi character and one of the best heels in the business back in like the 70s as well as like late 60s. David Manning was former referee and promoter for Fritz Von Erich's promotion, which was World Class Championship Wrestling. And of
Mhm.
course, this episode, since it has to do with wrestling history, it included one of our favorite talking heads of the Dark Side of the Ring series. Of course, we're talking about Mr. Jim Cornette,
Yep.
former manager and wrestling historian. They talk about the character of Fritz Von Erich and the move that he invented, the Iron Claw, which he passed down to all of his sons and became a moniker of the whole family. And of course, you know, since we're talking about the history of wrestling, we have to have someone else. This is a special appearance, first time in Season 1. My uncle, David Meltzer, the publisher of Wrestling Observer newsletter. He
He
talks
needed to
about the
clean up though. That room was filthy.
What
he's
the
a
fuck?
journalist. He's a
It was shit
journalist.
up. Like you don't got an assistant to
Like,
put that.
like, like, bro, like you got folders, you got binders, like what the fuck? Like,
You
don't
don't
you
have.
got boxes? Like you got like dude, like you look like you were like April O'Neil out of the fucking Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles flying through their shits when Michelangelo came into a fucking office or something.
Oh Jesus.
Like you see Jim Cornette's place, like everything is neat. It kind of probably got like a barcode or something on it. Like everything is somewhere in a neat place. You go on his place, it was papers on the floor. Like I'm surprised if no one to get injured if we don't even know about that was in that room.
Meltzer's a fucking hoarder.
Yes. If there was a episode on A&E called Wrestling Hoarders,
It'd
David
be him.
Meltzer would be the first person on that debut
And
episode.
that's fine. That's okay. But what we're saying is like you can have all of that stuff, but just like you can get interns now. I mean, like you know how many people love to be there in your room and start finding shit that's in there.
Maybe he doesn't want people in there.
You know what? I'm
Maybe
gonna
that's the
maybe
point. Maybe
okay.
that's the point.
All right.
So
All right.
so David Meltzer, of course, is here to talk about the popularity of world class championship wrestling in Texas and how it became like folklore in Texas history. And they talk about the popularity of the Von Erich sons. So first they talk about Kerry Von Erich, who became known as the Texas Tornado. They talked about him being like the star, the guy that had the it factor of the family.
The look.
And the look, yes. David Von Erich was the best performer. He was like the best in-ring technician. When you had Kevin, who talked about himself, and others talked about him being like the best athlete of the family. Then you also had Mike and Chris Von Erich, which we'll get to very, very shortly. So, what was your guys' thoughts on like the overview of the three main brothers, Kerry, David, and Kevin? Top guy,
Wow.
JJ.
Wow. I mean, it's one of those things. It was cool to kind of like get that reminder of how cool they were. Like to see that they were. You can say might have been the first guys that they portrayed like the comic book hero look. Like they were like the heroes of pro wrestling to take down the bad guys. Like they were like the cool guys. Like and it was like. It was they were trailblazers, like they were true trailblazers, and they were one of a kind. Clearly, like you ain't see families like this, and the fact that they was just like the way they came out, their look, their aura, all the girls were going crazy for them. Like it was like they were like the Beatles of wrestling. It was kind of like it was pretty cool to see that, and then like everything else was downhill from here.
I just wish that, I know the story is in the downfall and everything that happens, but I wish they would have spent more time talking about how popular and their footprint on professional wrestling history with their rivalry with the fabulous Freebirds. I feel like that was just talked about in passing. Like that was not even like emphasized of how big that rivalry was. When you talk about the 1980s outside of the WWF, it was really like Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes was a main rivalry. Ric Flair and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, and then you had the fabulous Freebirds and the Von Erichs. That was one of the main rivalries of the 1980s, and I feel like it was just passed over in this documentary.
Yes, definitely was. It was not even like mentioned, like not even an inch of it.
So it's kind of sad, but they get into like kind of like the downfall and how everything kind of starts to fall apart. And it starts with the brother David Von Erich. So Dave was the one who would have been the NWA champion because he had the NWA style of being a great in-ring technician and the look as well to go along with it. And then he told his mom said Kevin tells the story that his mom had a bad feeling before his trip to Japan. And David Manning tells the story of hearing about how David was dead. So basically, what happened was they first tell the story about an older brother who didn't even make it past the age of 6 because he was electrocuted at the age of 6 years old. Yep. Fritz was so angry after the first death of one of his sons. David Manning then tells the story about David passing away and having to ride all the way to his house. And as soon as he knocked on the door, Fritz says, "Which one is it?" And as that's sad that Fritz is like ready to hear about one of his sons passing away.
Yep, it's so sad. Yep.
And then we hear another character that we talked about earlier in the season, the last episode that we reviewed. Bruiser Brody was the one who told the family about finding David in his hotel in Japan. A lot of people thought that it was like an overdose. There was like a lot of rumors about that. And they talk about how huge the death was in Texas and 4,000 to 5,000 people showing up at the funeral. So, we got to see the video of that. How do you like feel about like that type of like impact that they have, because we didn't get to like kind of live through it as professional wrestling fans, but for like a professional wrestler to be that big in like 1985, 1986 is just amazing to me, like seeing that footage.
It's like almost like looking at like royalty, I want to say, because they like shut down the area for the car to pass through. Like schools let out early, as Kevin said. They had to have a loudspeaker outside so people can hear the service and like listen in, because they all couldn't fit inside of the church. So it just shows you that how much of an impact like that he left and his brothers left to this whole town or this whole state that they lived in.
True story. How about you, JJ?
I mean, that was powerful. When you have there's people's got to remember at this time, there's no media, there's no coverage of any of this stuff, and to still, it was Beatles like. I guess it was Beatle like you get 5,000-6,000 people, like that is popularity right there with no type of broadcasting. Just to when you get this type of news and this type of sadness, to see how powerful, and Kevin even said it himself, like he didn't even realize how big they were. Like, but until like that happened, and it's like, in their time of grieving, he looked like he got a little bit of not comfort, but like he was able to get through it a little bit better by seeing how much support he had, and it was like, wow, like it was really amazing to see the outpouring of support for such great icons of the business at that time.
And we'll kind of get into how that impact of like the people and the love of the people in Texas kind of impacts Kevin's life forever later on. But they talk about like the whole funeral, and they talk about the seeing the autopsy after the rumors of the overdose, and that his insides blew up due to a disease that's called gastroenteritis. They showed the David Von Erich Memorial event, which was this big event that Fritz decided to hold. It was called the Parade. They also, in junction with that, Fritz hosts the Parade of Champions in honor of David, with Kerry Von Erich versus Ric Flair for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. And basically the title that has eluded the family for all these years. It was 22,000 people in Texas Stadium for this event. And Kerry wins with a backslide, with the family filling the ring, and Kerry has the yellow rose that David made famous, bringing to the ring all those years as he celebrates. So how was that? Like taking a look at that, it made me want to just go out my way to see this matchup. Just seeing how big that crowd was before, like really like WrestleMania was having events like in that type of like buildings, like that type of crowd, and then like that big of a fan favorite, like the Texas hometown hero versus one of the greatest heels, greatest NWA World Heavyweight Champions of all time. I just want to see that match.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what did you guys think about seeing what basically that site back in Texas Stadium?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Like amazing. Like, and I it is my mistake. I thought, was it 22 or was it 42,000?
I believe they said 22,000. I may have been wrong. Maybe you have it right.
I thought I heard 42, but we could check. But just the size of the crowd when they put that little camera on, like the crowd, like you said, it looked massive.
Yeah.
For a wrestling event at that time, and it's not WrestleMania. It's not. It's literally with the NWA Championship, and literally what they said is all they wanted. That entire arena was for one thing to happen, to see that title swap. That's the only thing that they were there for. And you can feel that was probably one of the first times where a crowd popped. Like that was probably where pops originated from. That was probably the OG of pops right there. That place erupted when he hit that backslide and he got that 3 count. That place went crazy, and you could see it. Like there was no help needed from the cameras. Like you just saw it, and It was something that I wish that we got to see how that reign went for a little bit longer than they covered. But it was just like it was a beautiful, beautiful moment and something that was like something that the family desperately needed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think the rain lasted that long. I think that's why they kind of
Yeah,
skimmed over that
yeah.
part. And
Much so.
this seemed to be the apex, basically the last hurrah for the family as they quickly shift to the story of Lance Von Erich, which basically David Manning calls the worst angle in world class championship wrestling history, as they brought in a fake Von
On
Erich.
Eric, yep.
David
Yeah.
Manning, Cornette, and Uncle Dave Meltzer all say that this was like the worst angle that they could have done, and it lost the trust of the fans. So, what would you think, being a fan of World Class Championship Wrestling, and the Von Erichs, the good old boys, decided to lie to you and bring in a fake brother? How would you feel as a fan, Chrissy?
Um, I would not want to like. I would be like, why? Why are you lying to us? We already know who is in the family. We already know how many sons is there. Like, why would you want to lie to us? Like, we're not stupid. Like, I wouldn't appreciate it, and I would be very upset.
Yes, and the fans were very upset, and they never really got to gain the trust of the fans again. But they did try. They did try to bring in Mike Von Erich, one of the younger brothers, which we talked about earlier, and Uncle Dave once again coming in saying that Mike was not a very good wrestler at all. Kevin talks about Mike dislocating his shoulder, and then from that, basically going to the hospital to get surgery on it. He got a severe fever, which ended up being a staph infection that
Yep.
resulted in toxic shock syndrome. Kevin says that he rushed him to the hospital and then had to find out from one of the doctors. They told Kevin and the family that they had to say goodbye to Mike that night. There was a huge scene in the hospital with one of their priests from one of the Texas churches out there, who basically yells at God and claiming that he followed the good book and they shouldn't be doing this, and he slams the Bible down. Kevin was very uncomfortable by this, but right after that, the doctor rushes in and tells them that Mike will survive.
Right.
And they show the scene where Mike came on camera after this event and
They had a
said that
press
he
conference.
yes, they had a press conference for Mike as he got out the hospital and said that he would be back to wrestling. And you could
Yep.
tell that he was still sick when you saw that.
Like,
So I felt uncomfortable watching it,
yep.
honestly.
He
How
was.
about you?
He looked damn blue, like pale. Like it just. I don't even know what made them think that that's okay to have all these cameras and speak to this boy, knowing that he just got out the hospital, and there's no way he looks like he's in any condition to do anything for a long time.
Yeah, he looked horrible. Like it literally looked, it really looked uncomfortable. It's like when you go to the hospital and you see one of your sick relatives and you're like, I'm just gonna sit by your bed for a while until your meds kick in or something like that, and then I feel comfortable to go home.
Right,
And
right.
he goes on camera and gives an interview looking like that. Like, what the hell?
I would not put my family member out there like that.
No, yeah, someone should have said no. Don't do this. Like you didn't like. I feel like he felt like pressure to like be out there and like to compete again. But it was no. You don't need to do that.
I just
It
got
was
one question.
ill-advised.
What the hell were they thinking with Lance, man? How they gonna put a grown ass Von Erich in there that we never seen before? Like, what the hell is that, man? He was a grown boy. Like, he just poof.
Right, he
He
disappeared.
he got another kid that's a full grown up.
Like, did you have this before your wife? Like, you I know sometimes it happens.
The bastard Von Erich.
Yep, yep.
Pretty
Like
much.
like Jones.
The missing son. Uh, so Cornette and Meltzer, they talk about them trying to rush Mike back. Kevin talks about Mike having particular breakdowns after his incident in the hospital, and then Mike was arrested. He went missing after being released from the prison, and Mike was found dead due to overdose. Kevin had to basically take a break after reliving this because he was like, it was like too much for him to like go over and reminisce. Then we move on to the next brother, which was Chris Von Erich. They talk about Chris not being built like a wrestler, and he was their one last desperate attempt to save the family.
Was he the
Um,
youngest one, right?
huh?
He was the youngest one.
Yes, he was the
Yeah,
youngest one, the shortest one, the smallest one,
the
basically.
non-athletic one.
The most normal looking one,
Yep.
basically. He was like a regular civilian.
Yeah, pretty much. Uncle Dave is back. He talks about how World Class Championship Wrestling was pretty huge in 1986, but then being dead by 1988, 1989. Chris had severe asthma, as well as all the stuff that we just talked about with him being not built like a professional wrestler. Kevin even talks about Chris not having all these traits that you need to be a good wrestler, like reflexes, athleticism, and then Chris breaks his arm while training. Kevin then tells the story of the night Chris took off to kill himself. He followed Chris up to this hill. Chris asks if Kevin read his note when Kevin finds him. Kevin says, "What note?" and asks if Chris is going to kill himself, which Chris tells him and begs him
No.
off, tells him no, and which Kevin, as a brother, basically tries to believe him. Then he goes back to the house and he finds his father and he asks his father if Chris ever writes suicide notes, which his father tells him to go back to the hill immediately when he gets home. Kevin then finds when he gets back to the hill that Chris had shot himself in the head as he picks him up and he finds the hole in the back of his head. And Kevin kind of talks about how he wishes that he never left that night. So
Mhm.
this is probably the most powerful story of all the deaths that they
Right,
talk
right.
about in this documentary. So what was your thoughts on this one?
He tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. That's why he left. But I'm sure deep down you always have that what if, but he didn't. He didn't do that. He just left him and tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. He's like, yeah, you probably just joking. But as soon as he got home, he asked his dad. Like he always had that doubt. But it was one of the saddest parts of the story to hear about him finding him, and just like he could have been here still if he would have stayed with him, maybe.
Yeah. How about you, JJ?
What do you do?
Right.
Like it's like Jesus. It's like, yo, we're not even halfway through on how tragic this thing has gotten already. Like
Yeah.
it's and with the Chris one, it was like try. It felt like which is like he was kind of in over his head, and the response that he was getting, and if anybody sounded in criticism the way Dave Meltzer sounded on this episode, if that was constant, like and if he's not getting any positive reinforcements, who's helping him?
Yeah.
Like who's helping him through just constantly being bashed, constantly being told he doesn't have the look of Von Erichs, he's not a real Von Erich, and it's like, oh my God, like how much can this man deal with without help?
Right.
And yeah, and then you start to get that guilt that just keeps coming. Like the guilt comes, and it's when you see what he's did to himself, it's one of those things that it's as unfortunate as it is. It's almost like you felt that it was coming.
Yeah.
Like if you was able to follow it, and it was just like it's so disastrously bad. Like, and it just and that is right. I believe this is where Kevin started to really feel reliving this, because he was doing really good. Like
Yeah.
he was feeling positive. He was he was going through it and sharing his feelings. And this one is where it was like, damn, this was a lot harder than I thought that this was gonna be.
Yeah, he
And
asks us to take another break after
yeah,
this.
yeah,
It's tough. He did a wonderful job for everything that he
Yeah.
had to relive and reminisce about. Then they move on to the final tragic story of the Von Erich clan, which is Kerry Von Erich, and how he joined the WWF and becoming Texas Tornado. He went there with a secret in which Kerry gets into a motorcycle accident where he crashed into a parked police car. They amputated his leg due to this accident, which he kept secret about for all these years. This happened in 1986. He won the NWA World Heavyweight Championship with an amputated leg, and they never made it known because didn't want him to be looked at in any sort of different way. So it winded up being a 6-year secret, which he brought with him to the WWF. And it was another thing that he had to hide, which had to weigh heavy on him, which David Manning kind of talks about. Meltzer talks about how the WWF took his name and he couldn't do the Von Erich call, so it took away a lot of the traits that made him a star, because he was like, without the Von Erich name, what is he? They show pics about to confirm how Kerry was a party animal, and he had pics with Mr. T, and they talk about his drug use. Kerry used to talk glowingly about the courage that it took for Chris to kill himself. Which scared a lot of people, like David Manning, as well as his brother Kevin. In 1983, the same day that Kerry was being indicted on drug charges, he took a drive to his father's place. Kerry pulls up at his father's place and hugs his dad. Then he basically goes off and gets back into his car. Fritz then goes into the house and finds that Kerry took his gun out and to the field, and then he rushes to the field where he finds his car and finds only one glove, with the other glove his shooting hand, and he finds Kerry shot himself in the heart. And Fritz describes it that he never saw Kerry as peaceful as that moment. So what did you guys think about the whole twisted affair that was Kerry Von Erich, with the hiding of the amputated leg, going into WWF, his time in WWF, and then his tragic death?
I have to now go back and look at videos of the Texas Tornado, because I'm like, he had an amputated leg the whole time. Like, that's like, what, his leg didn't come off? Like, how did that even, like, it's just surprising to me. Like, he had this big old secret, and he never said anything. He fought Ric Flair in this big old match, and no one never knew anything about his leg except only the family. It's like the biggest secret. It's like craziness to me.
And even if you probably look back at the tapes, you probably won't see it, because if you remember back then with the boots, they used to wear boots all the way up to the top of their kneecap.
Yeah.
So like,
and they had on knee pads too. Yes,
right.
you're right.
So then they had the boots that was up to the top of their calf, and then they had knee pads on. So they had pretty much half of their leg is covered. So you probably won't see it even if you look back. He probably still looks relatively like he's still mobile and still moving kind of normal, but to hold that in, and I think him going to WWE or WWF at the time was probably the last straw for him, because it's probably now all of his secrets has been exposed. Like, all his stuff has been exposed. Yeah. So he no longer has a secret. He no longer has his name. He no longer has his stardom. He no longer has his family. So what does he have? He's now he's the Texas Tornado.
He's a fish in a big pond.
Like, and it's like, they sometimes, like, it slipped when we heard on them commentating, like, Texas Tornado, Kerry Von Erich. Like, you hear it slip a couple of times, but his name was a Texas Tornado, and it was, damn, they just took everything from this man. Like, and it's, they gave him some little crappy, I think he became Intercontinental Champion one time.
Yeah.
He did. He defeated Mr. Perfect for the Intercontinental Championship.
They try to basically make him the Ultimate Warrior 2.0. And it was like, he's now not himself anymore. Like, they stripped everything from him. So now, how can he be?
WWE doing what they do best.
Yeah, this is kind of like one of their final works of taking literally somebody's whole identity and just making it their own, because it's their company.
Yep.
But
This is a perfect example or earliest example of them not wanting to use someone else's idea. So
Like, you know how much stardom like he would have drew. Like he was already a star.
yeah.
You should have just played on who he was. He was a Von Erich. He's from this famous family. Like, people not stupid. I mean, being a kid back then, I didn't know who he was. But if you would have played off of that, of like this big person that fought Ric Flair, like Ric freaking Flair, come on, like, you
if
didn't
you
play
would have
off that.
just if you would have just used the Kerry Von Erich name with the video packages in WWF, you would have been a fucking megastar.
It's
But
true.
He
no,
could have
he's
probably
a
been here.
Texas tornado. He's coming at you.
And Vince definitely came up with that stupid ass name.
Absolutely. So we move on to talk about how Fritz and his wife Doris broke up due to all the deaths and the tragicness of this family demise. Fritz also had brain damage and cancer. One day he pulls a gun on Kevin and says that if you had the guts, you would kill yourself too. Kevin tells him that it takes guts to live, not to
Mm-hmm.
die. And Kevin had to run out of the house before his father shot him, saying that he didn't want cancer to decide his life. And Kevin says that he was happy when his father finally died because he could tell how much he was suffering. So
Mm-hmm.
finally, we get this very powerful story to kind of wrap things up as we end this documentary. As Kevin tells a powerful story about how he was so down on life one day and wanted to die or go to prison. So he goes into a gun store in Texas and tries to steal a gun from the store because he says, "Hey, if you steal a gun, you're gonna get arrested. You'll spend time in prison." Then he then he looks up and he sees three older Texas men who are just looking at him. Kevin puts the gun down back on the rack, then goes to walk out, and then he turns before walking out and says to the man, "You got something to say?" And the man looks at him and says, "Love you, Kevin." And Kevin walks out of the store and goes in his car to think about what just happened. And he starts breaking down, crying. And he pulls out one of the rifles that he does own, and he goes back into the store and he gives it to the man into the store and tells the man that he loves him too. And him and the three older men start hugging. And he talks about it being a great day for Texas and how it really changed his outlook on life after that, with everything that he had been going through. So, what did you guys think about this very, very powerful story that Kevin told that kind of like changed his future for him?
He was hurting. Like, everyone around him was just, is gone. And at one point it's going to like trigger you, and then it's gonna catch up. And he just couldn't deal with it, and he just wanted to just take all the pain away. And the people in the store, thank God for them, because they stopped him from doing something that he probably would have. Well, he wouldn't regret, but he wouldn't be here. You know what I'm saying? If he would have done the next step and probably take his life, because he was in a bad space. So he found someone to like probably get him out, and probably got help, and now is in a better place than where he was at when all that tragedy was happening.
How about you, JJ?
Oh man, when I think just with the culmination of everything that has taken place with, and just those, this goes back to the beginning of the show where where it's narrated, the only surviving brother.
Mm.
Like, he's the only one. Like, it's you had a freaking family tree and you're the last of it. And obviously it's all caught up, it's all catching up, and it's overwhelming. Like, it's like, bravo to that man, bravo to Kevin, man, because you can't even imagine thinking about what you emotionally have to go through when experiencing that a handful of times.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's nuts to think that, like, your whole goddamn family. So he hit the tipping point, and then somebody, it was like kind of like, it's like one of those things that you literally you just see God just basically just send a light
Mm-hmm.
to just send that light, and just here, just give him that moment and just say, I love you. And then he reflected on it, and then that saved his life. That literally saved his life. The smallest thing that's just saved his life, and that was so fucking powerful because it created the man he is right now. This peaceful man that's living out his best days, and he's at peace as much as he could with everything that he's had to go through, and he's a strong man. He's a strong man, and I don't even think we have to talk about who the MVP of the show was because
it's no question.
He might be the MVP of Dark Side of the Ring because it's like
I was gonna say he might be my MVP of season 1. He's
season 1, definitely. Yep, I agree.
Definitely got the MVP of season 1 moniker for how much he had to relive and reminisce in this. We also got to see at the end his sons Ross and Marshall, who later became, after this documentary, the MLW Tag Team Champions and are wrestling for Major League Wrestling. So very happy for them. Very happy for the success of the Von Erich family because of how much they have gone through throughout the years.
Yep.
So that wraps up our season 1, episode 4, The Last of the Von Erichs. The next Wednesday, right here on the True Hill Heat YouTube channel, you can check out The Mysterious Death of Gorgeous Gino, which is season 1, episode 5. Are you guys ready for that one? Not a character that many fans have talked about. It's more of a mysterious story about his death, and it has to do with the mob. So it's going to be very interesting next week.
Another Dino Bravo. How about that?
Yeah, I'm you know what, man? After this one, I'm ready to laugh a little bit, man, because this one this sounds like it's gonna be a mob story waiting to happen, man.
I don't know if you're gonna laugh, but it's gonna be interesting. So you guys can check that out. As always, like, share, and subscribe. It helps the channel grow. It helps other wrestling fans like yourself get this True Hill Heat YouTube content. You could click the little box right here, and it has the playlist for all the rest of our Dark Side of the Ring season 1 and season 2 reviews, and of course push the bell to stay notified for all the great content right here on True Hill Heat. So for the princess of all the True Hills, Miss Chrissy Love, for our resident True Hill alcoholic Top Guy JJ, it is me, your True Hill Phenom SP3. We are signing off until next time.